Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome. We are in the second portion in the book of Leviticus, Tzav. For those who have been following along, you know that this section of Torah is a challenge. It's a challenge to connect with in the modern world because this section of the Torah speaks about the sacrifices. It not only speaks about the sacrifices, but it speaks in detail about the sacrifices, exactly what it should be and how we should be doing. And the reality is, most of these things that we talk about in the Torah in Leviticus, in this section, we actually don't do anymore. We don't have the temple in Jerusalem. We don't offer sacrifices, neither there nor certainly here, right? And so the question then comes, what can we learn? How can we learn from these sacrifices for today and for the 21st century? We started to speak about that a little bit last week, and we're going to now focus on one particular aspect of the Torah portion today. Because while the general flow of the sacrifices isn't something that we focus on in terms of how we do, there are amazing nuggets of wisdom and of spirituality that can be found within our Torah portion. So I'm going to invite everyone to open up the other red book that's in front of you, the larger of the two. It says Eitz Chaim on the front. That is the book that's going to have our scriptural readings both from the book of the Torah and the Haftorah, which comes from prophets, that Simon will be reading later. And we're going to turn to page 613, which is a good page to turn to. It's a good number. For those who are unfamiliar, 613 are the number of commandments that we have in Judaism. It's a great place to start. The beginning of the portion, Tzav, reads as follows. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Tzav et Aharon ve'et banav, command Aaron and his sons thus. So the first thing is, there's a change. Up until this point in time, the commandments have been going through Moses to the entirety of the people of Israel. But now, we're talking about Aaron and Aaron's sons, which represent the priesthood. It represents those people that are going to be doing these sacrifices. And this is sort of that leadership pep talk, right? On what they need to be thinking about, what they need to be doing, because they have a job to do. And they're doing it not just for themselves, they're doing it for the entirety of the people, but they have an important role that they need to play. And it goes on. Zot Torat Ha'olah, this is the ritual of the burnt offering. Starting with the first, and this section will define the different types of sacrifices. The burnt offering itself shall remain where it is, burned upon the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar is kept going on it. The priest shall dress in linen raiment with linen breeches next to his body, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar and place it beside the altar. So what's the first thing that we learn about the burnt offering? I see somebody in the back. Yes. All night. Right. It's supposed to be on the altar all night. And unless you have a really good smoker and are cooking it low and slow, right, what's going to happen then to that meat, to the offering that's on there? It's going to completely burn, right? It's going to completely burn. And ultimately, all that we're going to have left are ashes. Now, it's important to understand that some of the other offerings, actually most of the other offerings, there is a portion, at least, of the animal that is eaten, either by the priests or by the people who are bringing the offering. If you're bringing a Thanksgiving offering, right, then you're going to get a portion of that back so that you can eat that and celebrate that Thanksgiving offering. If it's a guilt offering or a sin offering, well, you're not going to get any of that because you're offering it up, and that goes to the priests. But this offering is different because this offering nobody gets, right? It's completely burned. Okay? Let's continue. Verse 4. He shall then take off his vestments and put on other vestments and carry the ashes outside the camp to a pure place. Right? Shouldn't stay in the camp. It needs to go outside of the camp. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning, not to go out. Every morning the priest shall feed wood to it, lay out the burnt offering on it, and turn into smoke the fat parts of the offering of well-being. That's a different offering. A perpetual fire. Eish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tichbe. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. This is important. This is important. So the question is, what do we learn from this? Right? This isn't, oh, we're ready to do this offering. Let's light up the fire, let's get it going, and now we can make the offering. This is that altar will always have a fire burning on it so that this offering can be done on a regular basis. The question is, what do we learn from that? To me, I think there's a powerful spiritual lesson that we can learn from this. But I want us to do a little bit of thinking today. What can we learn from the fact that this fire is always on, it's always there? Which is a little different, by the way, than the Ner Tamid, than the eternal light that was also lit, right? We have that, that's a different light. This is actually the fire of the altar itself that kept going. Yeah? I like that, right? So for those who are playing our home game and can't hear that, maybe it's supposed to represent faith. The fact that faith needs to always be there. But then you said something which we're going to get back to, is that we have to keep feeding that, right? We can't just let it go, otherwise it's going to burn out. But every day we're going to have to put the logs in. We're going to have to add to that. We're going to have to do something in order to make sure that it goes. Otherwise, it'll burn out. Beautiful. Beautiful. What else? Brad?
It's the importance of routine. You have to put the wood on in the morning, so then it keeps burning. You then have to put the various offerings in order. At the end of the day, the burnt offering goes on and it keeps it from burning. Again.
Right.
Otherwise it goes out. It doesn't say how you light it in the first place.
Right. This is I agree 100%. This talks about this builds a routine. Right? And it's a never-ending routine. It happens. It doesn't talk about how the initial fire was lit here. There is a sanctification and a ceremony that lights the fire, that builds the altar, that lights the fire first. But once that's lit, it doesn't go out. And it keeps going. And in order to be able to make these offerings, the day-to-day routine of maintenance, of keeping this fire going, has to be there. And in and of itself, getting up and worshiping, right, with that offering every day is part of a routine. And there's a plus and a minus to that, right? There's a plus and a minus to that. Rabbi Ern and I spoke, actually, I think it was about this particular parsha this week. I'm kind of blurring the parsha podcasts, right? It was about this week's parsha, about kavanah and keva, this idea of intention and passion that we have in a moment of prayer and worship, and the ritual fixed nature of certain things, and that balance between the two. We need both. Good. What else?
I like what the commentary below the line on 613 has to say about the fire representing the enthusiasm and the dedication, that the dedication of the clergy is never extinguished. But it reminded me of an interview with the late Elie Wiesel, and they were asking him something like, if the building is on fire, what are you going to go in and get? And he said, the fire. And he talked about how important that fire was, because it's like energy.
Yeah.
And you talked about it in a very positive way. Of course, I can't look it up right now.
Right.
To that extent, and forgive me for not saying it so eloquently like Elie Wiesel.
No, but look, fire is a very powerful symbol. It's a very, very powerful symbol. And actually, one of the sources that I brought today that I wanted to share with you comes from the Tikkunei HaZohar. And when they write about this particular sentence, this particular verse, it writes, one older person stood up from behind a wall and said, Rebbe, my teacher, the holy light, come and light candles, for it is a mitzvah, it is a commandment. On that it is said, an everlasting fire shall be kept burning on the altar, it should not be extinguished. And on that it is also said to light an eternal flame. This is surely the light of the divine, the light that shines within the soul of every person. Come light it, right? This idea of us lighting a fire, a flame, has become so powerful. So powerful. And, we talk about it almost as if, sure, it's just something that we do. But lighting Shabbat candles is actually one of the most powerful rituals of the Friday night. Everybody thinks about the wine or the challah or all these sorts of things, but the truth of the matter is that if we don't actually do what the lighting of the candles asks us to do, the rest of everything else is totally irrelevant. Because we can have wine any day. We can eat challah any day. Actually, the reality is we can light candles any day, right? But when we light the Shabbat candles at the beginning of Shabbat and we say, okay, this moment is a transitional moment. From this point on, everything is going to be different. Everything is going to change. And it reminds me, actually, my wife Debbie and I were just speaking. She was at Ralph's La Jolla and ran into Rabbi Moshe Leader, who's a Chabad rabbi here in San Diego, and Debbie and I have known him forever and ever and ever. And we actually, when we were dating, went and stayed at his house for Shabbat when we were in college many, 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 many years ago. And it was the first time that I understood the power of the moment of lighting candles. Because if you are an Orthodox family, especially an Orthodox rabbinic family, likely you're going to have a lot of children. And when we were staying there as college students, I've never in my life seen such chaos, right? In the hour or two before Shabbat, it was a madhouse, right? And I was a college student, I'm used to whatever, but I was just totally overwhelmed with the chaos that was going on in that house. And then we lit candles, and it stopped instantly. And there was a sense of peace and quiet that I had never seen before. And it was that dichotomy of saying, lighting these candles, right, being involved in that ritual makes a difference. It transitions us from one moment to the next, which is hard to do unless we physically do something. So the act of lighting, the act of being involved in lighting was actually a spiritual act as well. So I agree with Brad 100% that you have to do that if you want to make the sacrifices. But it's that and, right? It's a spiritual act of saying, every single time I come and I put that wood in, I'm elevating, I'm adding to that light, I'm adding to that fire, I'm elevating the moment. Every single time we find the time to light Shabbat candles, we add to the light in the world, to the holiness, and to our ability to transition and think about different moments and different times. Yeah.
I'd like to sort of to add to that, the and part. And I would suggest maybe people already do it, but just to put a few coins in the tzedakah box right before you light the candles. And it really does, it's almost like that act. I hadn't put that together, but that act of like getting it ready and and you can hear the Kohan and they're wearing like, certain clothes and just even if it's just something special like you put on, I wear my grandmother's, what she used to wear her head, and just
Right. So there's a lot of different ways to elevate that ritual. Some people, put money in the tzedakah box. It's a great way to get any change out of your pockets before Shabbat, right? Some people, not that anybody carries change anymore, which is a whole different issue. But yeah, those rituals are important and being involved in it. In our house, I'm actually the one who sets up the candles for Debbie. And Debbie can certainly do it for herself. Michael or Rachel, our children, could have done it. But every year since we've been married, I set up the candlesticks and she lights them. And that act of doing that for me is part of the ritual, right? It's not just, we need the candlesticks there, obviously, before we light. But I go there and I prepare them and I try to make sure that the candle looks, is good so that when you touch it, it doesn't just go out because some of the wicks don't work so well. And I try to pick ones that are going to work. And, I make sure that the candlesticks look good. And if there's wax on it from before, I take it off. That's part of the ritual. And it's part of what we can do to make it special. Yeah.
I think this goes along with what everybody's saying, but I want to tie it back to the burning bush. Moses connected with God first with the burning bush.
Yeah.
We have a connection with the fire and with the people seeing God.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? The image of fire, that image, whether it's the burning bush, whether it's the fire that was on Mount Sinai, right? That image of fire and light is very much how we connect to God. We were actually just talking about this, right, Simon? We were just talking about this as we were looking up at our ark at the rehearsal. And we were saying that ark is the burning bush. That is how it was intended. That was the creation of it. It's a burning bush. And most people don't see it. But I showed Simon when he was up here. If you look closely, and you're welcome to come up later, there's actually leaves made out of copper that are on here to represent that burning bush. Most people have never even seen it, right? You don't really see it that close, but they're there. That's such a powerful symbol, light and fire. And this is that next level, the next step, right? Moses saw the burning bush, but now it's not going to be God doing this anymore. It's going to be we creating that light that symbolizes God. Good. Any other comments on this, or any other ways that we can understand this light? And then I'll share one last poem with you before we get to reading it. Yes, sir.
It also, coming after the commandment to keep Shabbat, then tells the priests, every day you have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And brings forward the idea that, maybe a day of rest actually requires work, at least.
Yeah. I like that. A day, so it's so hard to choose the right English words. A day of rest doesn't require work because we're not supposed to do work, but a day of rest requires effort, right? A day of rest requires effort. And we know that, right? If you want to go on a good vacation where you're going to rest, you're going to put a lot of effort into that beforehand. Otherwise, you're not going to be resting at all, right? We know that. It takes consciousness and effort to say, I'm going to set aside this time to be special, to be a time that I'm going to rest, to be time that I'm going to spend with family. Because there's tons of things that we could be doing each and every day that pull us in different directions. So this light that we are now responsible for, and I think it does come from the light of the burning bush, right? But it's now in our hands. That we then make sure that we feed, that we nurture, that we take care of, so that it's part of our everyday life, is one of the most powerful things in the spiritual world that we can be thinking about. How do we nurture that within ourselves? And I want to end with a poem, actually, by Rabbi Yael Levi. It's called "The Always Fire," and she starts with this verse: "A fire shall continually burn on the altar, it shall not go out." And she writes, "What is this fire we are asked to tend always? It is the fire that comes from the flames of the burning bush. Fire that spoke to each of us by name and asked, 'Where are you on your path? What is your life about?' It is fire that comes from the flames of Sinai. Fire that said to us, all is one. Live in ways that honor the oneness. Live in ways that honor all. This fire is ours to tend. Let us be kind and gentle with ourselves and with others. Let us practice gratitude and find reason and opportunity to say thank you again and again. Let us be true to where we are in the moment, and with care, release the impulse to control what will be. Each of us on our own paths, all of us together on this journey, let us make holy our words and our actions. May the fires we tend light the way. Shabbat Shalom.